Dad said, "You're not smart enough for college. I just got my PhD acceptance yesterday." My dad said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was saving me from embarrassment. We were standing in my parents' kitchen with the overhead light buzzing softly and the smell of baked ham clinging to everything, and he pointed at the flyer in my hand like it was a parking ticket. "You're not smart enough for college," he said, flat and certain, and then he turned back to the counter as if the conversation was over. My fingers tightened around my phone so hard the plastic case creaked. I could feel my pulse in my wrists. My mom froze halfway to the fridge, one hand still wrapped around the door handle, her eyes flicking from his face to mine like she was watching a glass fall in slow motion. In my bag on the chair behind me, a single sheet of paper was folded into quarters. My acceptance letter, printed out because I needed to see it in ink, not just glowing on a screen. The paper felt like it had weight, like it was pressing against the zipper. I swallowed and tasted coffee and bile. "Say that again," I heard myself say, too calm. He didn't even look guilty. He shrugged and wiped his hands on a dish towel, the same dish towel he always used, faded with tiny bleach spots. "Hannah, I'm being real with you," he said, and now he finally looked at me, eyes narrowed like I was the one making it uncomfortable. "You get these ideas and then you get hurt. College isn't for everyone. You're not built for that. You'd be happier doing something normal." The word normal hit me harder than the insult. My throat tightened, and for a second I had that stupid urge to argue the way I used to when I was 17. Like if I could just explain myself better, he'd understand. But my body remembered all the times I'd tried and failed. The room felt too bright. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a lawn mower started up. My mom finally whispered, "Mark," like she was trying to calm a dog. He waved her off. "Don't baby her," he said. Then he looked back at me and added, almost kindly, "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to stop you from wasting time." Yesterday afternoon, at 3:17 p.m., I got the email. I was sitting in my tiny office at the lab, the one with a desk that wobbles if you lean on it and a whiteboard that still has someone else's grant deadlines scribbled in the corner. I'd been refreshing my inbox like a maniac for days, telling myself I wasn't, telling myself I was being normal about it. My hands were shaky from too much coffee and not enough lunch. When the subject line popped up, "Congratulations from the Doctoral Admissions Committee," my brain literally didn't process it. I clicked it and reread the first sentence 3 times because I was sure I'd hallucinated it from stress. Then it sank in, slow and hot, like sunlight. I covered my mouth with my palm because this little laugh tried to escape me, and I didn't want my coworkers to hear and ask questions before I could even breathe. I turned my chair away from the hallway, stared at the screen until the letters blurred, and finally let myself whisper, "Oh my God," to the empty room. I printed the letter because I needed it to be real. The printer jammed twice. I stood there in the copy room waiting, heart pounding like I was stealing something, and when the page finally slid out, warm and slightly curled at the edges, my eyes stung. I folded it carefully and put it in my bag like it was fragile. And then I drove to my parents' house, because even though I've spent years telling myself I don't need my dad's approval, some stupid part of me still wanted him to know. Not to gloat. Not to prove him wrong in a movie moment way. Just to finally have him see me accurately. To finally have him stop talking about me like I'm a kid with unrealistic daydreams. The thing is, my dad has been telling me I'm not smart enough for college since I was 14.
He's not an evil guy.
He's not a cartoon villain who twirls a mustache and laughs at his daughter. He's the kind of man who thinks harshness equals honesty. He grew up with a dad who believed feelings were a weakness and school was something other people did. My dad left high school early, started working, got praised for being tough, and built his whole identity around being practical. He is brilliant in his own way. He can fix an engine by sound. He can spot a leak by smell. But he doesn't respect academic intelligence because he's always been secretly embarrassed that it wasn't his world. When I was a kid, I loved school. I loved it in that nerdy, embarrassing way where you enjoy the smell of new notebooks and you get excited about a good teacher. I'd bring home A's, and my mom would put them on the fridge. My dad would glance at them and say, "Good," like it was expected, and then warn me not to get too big for my boots. When I started talking about university, he didn't say, "That's great." He said, "Don't get your hopes up." My younger brother, Kyle, is the opposite of me. He's social, athletic, the kind of kid teachers forgive because he smiles. My dad and Kyle have always been easy together. They speak the same language, sports stats, tools, jokes that are mostly insults. Kyle struggled in school, and Dad framed it as school is stupid anyway. When I did well, Dad framed it as don't think you're special. Same house, two completely different narratives. When it came time to apply for college the first time, I did it alone. I filled out forms at midnight. I wrote essays in my bedroom with the door shut because Dad would walk past and say things like, "All that writing won't get you anywhere." When I got into a decent university, I was so excited I ran downstairs with the letter in my hand. My mom cried. My dad stared at it and said, "How much is that going to cost?" That was his version of celebration. I made it through undergrad by sheer stubbornness and a messy patchwork of scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans. I worked mornings at a cafe, where the smell of burnt milk clung to my hair, then went to lectures, then closed the cafe at night, then did homework at 1 a.m. while my roommate slept. I didn't tell my dad when I struggled. I didn't tell him when I failed my first organic chem exam and cried in the library bathroom. I didn't tell him when I wanted to quit. I learned early that his support came with an "I told you so" attached. After I graduated, I didn't go straight into a PhD. I got a research assistant job because I loved being in a lab, because I loved the hum of the machines and the quiet focus of people trying to figure something out. I did my master's part-time while working, which meant my life was basically a loop of commuting, experiments, late-night writing, and microwaved dinners. When I told my dad I'd started the master's, he laughed and said, "More school. When are you going to start real life?" I stopped updating him after that. It wasn't worth the cost of letting him shrink it. So yesterday, with that acceptance letter in my bag, walking into my parents' kitchen, I was already carrying years of this. I was carrying every time he dismissed me, every time he'd called my ambition ideas, every time he treated education like a hobby I'd outgrow. The stupidest part is that he didn't even know what I was applying for. He thought I was thinking about maybe taking some classes again because I'd asked my mom where my old high school transcripts were. I'd asked because the program wanted official copies. My mom, bless her, was excited but nervous, the way she gets when she anticipates my dad being my dad. She told him I was looking into something. He heard college, and his brain went straight to the script he always uses. Protect himself by cutting me down first. So when he said, "You're not smart enough for college," it wasn't new. It was just louder than usual. I stood there in the kitchen, and something in me finally refused to bend. I set my phone down on the counter so my hands wouldn't shake. I turned and pulled my bag onto the chair. My dad watched me with that irritated patience, like he was waiting for me to stop being dramatic. My mom's fingers hovered near her mouth, a nervous habit. Kyle leaned in the doorway, curious now, because he could smell a fight like a dog smells thunder. I unzipped the bag and took out the folded page. The paper was soft at the creases from me checking it over and over. I smoothed it on the counter with my palm like I was laying out evidence. Dad's eyes flicked down. "What's that?" I looked at him. "This," I said, and my voice was steady in a way I didn't expect, "is my acceptance letter." He made a dismissive sound. "Acceptance to what? Some community?" "No." I cut in, sharper than I meant to. I took a breath and forced myself not to yell because I didn't want this to become noise. "It's a PhD program. Doctoral. Fully funded." The kitchen went quiet. Even the fridge hum felt louder. My mom's face changed first. Her eyes widened, then filled immediately, and she let out a little sound like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Hannah," she whispered. Kyle's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, PhD? Like Doctor?" he asked, half impressed, half confused. My dad stared at the paper without touching it, like it might burn him. For a second his mouth opened, then closed. He cleared his throat. Where? He finally asked, and his voice was rougher than before. I tapped the header on the letter. Here, I said, and slid it slightly closer so he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen it. He read it silently. I watched his eyes move across the lines, watched the muscles in his jaw tighten. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't smile. The first thing he said was, "How long is it?"
5 years, I said.
Maybe 4 if everything goes well. He exhaled through his nose, and the old irritation tried to come back. And you think you can do that? I felt my hands tremble, but I didn't hide them. I already did a master's while working full-time, I said. I've been doing that for years. My mom touched my arm lightly, like she needed to confirm I was real. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, and I believed her. My dad's eyes flicked to my mom, then back to me. His pride and his insecurity wrestled right there on his face, and it made me tired. Finally he said, "Well, I didn't know." Like that was the problem. Like ignorance excused cruelty. "You didn't ask," I said quietly. Kyle shifted awkwardly, suddenly uncomfortable, because it's one thing to watch siblings tease each other, and another to watch your dad get exposed. "Dad," he muttered, "that's kind of huge." Dad's face hardened a little, and he did the thing he always does when he's cornered. He tried to regain control by minimizing. "A lot of people get into programs," he said. "Doesn't mean you'll finish. It's a long road." I stared at him and felt that old familiar ache, wanting him to just be happy for me, just once. But I also felt something new underneath it, the realization that I might never get that version of him, and that I didn't have to keep injuring myself trying. "I don't need you to believe in me," I said. My voice didn't crack. That surprised me most. "I needed you to stop telling me who I am. Because you're wrong." His eyes flashed, offended. "I'm your father." "And I'm your daughter," I said. "And you just told me I'm not smart enough for college while I'm standing here with a PhD acceptance letter in my hand. Do you hear yourself?" For a second, he looked genuinely shaken. Not enough to apologize immediately, but enough that the air shifted. My mom stepped between us, not like a shield, more like a bridge. "Mark," she said softly, "say congratulations." Dad swallowed. The muscles in his neck moved. "Congratulations," he said finally, but it came out stiff, like the word didn't fit in his mouth. I nodded once. "Thanks," I said, and I meant it in the way you thank someone for handing you the bare minimum. After that, the conversation didn't magically heal. We ate dinner anyway. Kyle asked a million questions because he didn't know what a PhD actually involved. My mom kept looking at me like she was afraid I'd disappear. My dad was quiet, picking at his food, occasionally making a practical comment about money, even though I'd already said it was funded. And later that night, when I was washing dishes, my dad came into the kitchen and stood behind me for a long moment. "I didn't mean it like that," he said low. I kept rinsing the plate. The water was hot against my hands. "How did you mean it?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. He stared at the sink like it was complicated. "I just don't want you to get hurt," he said finally. I turned the tap off and looked at him. "You don't get to hurt me to prevent me from getting hurt," I said. His face tightened, and for a moment I thought he'd get angry again. But instead he just nodded, small and stiff, like he was learning a new language too late. "All right," he murmured. I left soon after. In my car, I sat with the acceptance letter on the passenger seat, the streetlight outside making the paper glow faintly. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt wrung out. I felt proud, yes, but also oddly calm. Like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying since I was 14, the need for him to validate what I already knew about myself. I'm still processing what happens next. I don't know if my dad will ever be the kind of person who celebrates without qualifying it. I do know I'm going to start this program anyway. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the work. And I'm going to stop letting the loudest voice in my childhood be the one that narrates my future. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever had someone tell you you're not capable right before life proved them wrong, share your story in the comments. I'd really love to hear it.